No one anticipated the invisible woman's transformation into the most influential individual in the room. Evelyn entered the office through the side door, rolling her cleaning cart at her usual steady cadence, amidst the energy of the early morning bustle. No one noticed her. Her countenance was composed and unassuming, and she wore her dark green uniform as if it were armor, concealing none of the emotions she had carefully concealed. She was indistinguishable to the executives. She was merely the housekeeping woman, a person who occasionally exchanged courteous nods with the few who acknowledged her existence, emptied their garbage cans, and wiped their workstations. Hawthorne and Beck, a prosperous corporation located in the center of Dallas, Texas, had endured this situation for years. Evelyn, who was now in her mid-50s, had become accustomed to the dismissive glances and the routine. She overheard the quips they told when they believed she was not paying attention, and the manner in which her presence was perceived as an inconvenience. Just last week, as she peacefully awaited the conclusion of their meeting in order to clean the conference room, someone murmured, "She's not even doing anything right now." However, Evelyn did not respond. She never did. As she labored, she maintained her composure and maintained her hands in a fixed position. She was aware that it would be unwise to provide them with the gratification of a reaction. Evelyn's secret was unknown to them, and no one in that office was aware of it. A secret that is so potent that it has the potential to completely upend the structure. However, Evelyn was not impulsive. She was a proponent of perseverance, observation, and anticipation. Nevertheless, her composed demeanor concealed the fact that she was on the brink of a breakdown as she navigated the vividly illuminated hallways today. The morning proceeded as usual. Evelyn meticulously polished the glass doors, vacuumed the thick carpet in the vestibule, and arranged the disorganized desks of those who never hesitated to leave piles of documentation behind. Despite the presence of discussions regarding significant agreements and promotions, she continued to work assiduously. However, she was particularly intrigued by one conversation. She was not attempting to listen in. It was not in her nature, however. The voices were so boisterous that they were impossible to ignore. One executive stated, "The shareholders' meeting is scheduled for next week," with a tone that was both condescending and haughty. "And we have no cause for concern. The CEO is invincible, and the board is enamored with the figures. No one in their right mind would challenge him." After a brief delay, Evelyn tightened her grasp on the handle of her cart. She was aware of what they were unaware of. They were unaware of their error. However, Evelyn refrained from allowing her thoughts to persist for an extended period. She was required to remain prepared for the forthcoming tasks. Hawthorne and Beck was proud of its contemporary streamlined appearance. Its headquarters, a soaring glass structure situated in the heart of Dallas, were frequently showcased in business publications as a testament to the company's prosperity. Nevertheless, the actuality was significantly less glamorous on the inside. The culture was ruthless, and the further one advanced, the less they appeared to care about those below them. In those hallways, Evelyn had discreetly observed for nearly a decade. She observed that promotions were granted to employees who were the most vocal, rather than those who were the most qualified. She observed the clandestine agreements that were conducted behind closed doors, and the manner in which individuals attempted to conceal their errors by assigning responsibility to those who were incapable of defending themselves. He was followed by the CEO, Alan Greaves, who was a man who exuded both arrogance and authority. Alan was the type of leader who earned respect by instilling terror. His pointed comments had the effect of silencing even the most daring executives, as his voice reverberated in meetings. He was solely concerned with accomplishment, and individuals were merely instruments to be employed. His disparaging remarks regarding employees who did not conform to the image were frequently heard by Evelyn. "Is she still present?" Evelyn had once overheard Alan speak about one of the senior assistants. "Why have we not yet retired her? It is not as though she is contributing anything." The comments were not the sole issue. The organization was plagued by unethical practices that were concealed. Despite the leadership team's celebration of record-breaking profits, bonuses were discreetly reduced for the lower-level staff. Evelyn was informed of inflated expense reports, questionable client interactions, and the covert termination of a whistleblower who ventured to speak out. The housekeeping personnel, including Evelyn, were the ones who were most affected by the culture. She had observed her colleagues weep after being reprimanded for leaving a single particle of dust behind. Despite an increase in the burden, she had observed that their earnings remained stagnant, and of course, There was the consistent devaluation of their humanity, the manner in which individuals avoided eye contact, spoke down to them, or treated them as if they were mere furnishings. Evelyn's memory remains etched with a single incident. Coffee had been inadvertently poured on the marble floor in the vicinity of Alan's office by a young intern. The intern was visibly horrified as Alan approached the corner, causing him to freeze. "Are you joking?" Alan snapped. Evelyn, who had just passed by with her broom and pail, caught his attention. He yelled at her, as if she were at fault. "Clean this up." She did not utter a single syllable. She was not required to. Alan dismissed the intern with a dismissive hand, despite the intern's profuse apology. People such as Evelyn and the intern were little more than background noise to him. These moments had amassed over the years, each one contributing to the expanding mountain. Evelyn's forbearance was commendable. However, she was not impervious to the burden of it all. She experienced the exhaustion of being invisible, and the wound of disrespect. However, Evelyn had never been inclined to disintegrate. She allowed those instances to serve as a source of inspiration for her determination, reserving them like ammunition for the day she would require them. Her silence may have gone unnoticed by the employees in her vicinity, however it transmitted significant information. Evelyn was perpetually attentive and responsive. The more she observed, the more she came to the realization that the company's success was at the expense of its humanity. However, Evelyn was not merely recording information. She was silently devising a plan. The elements would soon begin to fall into position. Evelyn had maintained the confidentiality of her information for an extended period of time, not out of dread, but rather as a strategic decision. She was not merely a housekeeping woman. After her husband, Martin, passed away unexpectedly, she assumed the position of the company's largest shareholder in Hawthorne and Beck. Martin had been a discreet investor in the company's early days, acquiring shares when no one believed in its potential. By the time of his death, those shares had evolved into a controlling interest. Evelyn was initially uncertain about how to utilize this unexpected power. She was not a corporate strategist or a fixture in the boardroom. Evelyn was a woman who had reared 2 children, persevered through life's obstacles, and discovered comfort in routine. That was all. Nevertheless, she gradually came to appreciate the significance of her role as she continued to labor quietly within the organization. Her invisibility provided her with an advantage. She was able to observe without being observed, listen without arousing suspicion, and acquire all the necessary information about the individuals who believed they were in charge of the corporation. She reached her breaking point during a routine evening duty. Upon concluding her cleaning of the executive lounge, Evelyn overheard 2 senior managers engaging in a light-hearted conversation over a drink. They were discussing redundancies, and making light of the ease with which it was possible to eliminate unnecessary personnel without any repercussions. A few of these individuals behave as though their occupations are significant. One of them remarked with a chuckle. They are unaware of their replaceability. Evelyn's hand was firmly grasping the cleaning cloth as she stood motionless behind the door. These were not merely numerical values on a spreadsheet. These were genuine individuals with families, financial obligations, and aspirations. However, to these individuals, they were merely disposable assets. Evelyn occupied her tiny kitchen table that evening with a notepad and a cup of tea. She commenced writing, uncertain of the direction it would take, but aware that she could no longer remain silent. She provided a list of the unethical practices she had observed, the individuals who had been neglected, and the moments that had remained with her throughout the years. She had devised a strategy that would revolutionize everything by the time the sun rose. Her initial action was to conduct a more thorough investigation. Evelyn leveraged her access to the facility to acquire information that would have been overlooked by the majority of individuals. Even as she surreptitiously looked at documents left on desks, she took mental notes on conversations and paid attention to schedules. She was not engaging in theft or eavesdropping. She was merely assembling a picture of the company's interior workings by putting the parts together. Subsequently, reinforcements were summoned. Evelyn had a small number of trusted allies who were not affiliated with the company, including financial analysts, attorneys, and former employees who had departed on poor terms. She disclosed her expertise and solicited their counsel. They gradually assisted her in developing a strategy that would not only reveal the noxious culture but also ensure the company's future. The most challenging stage was the final one. Evelyn was aware that confronting the CEO and the board would necessitate more than just evidence. It would necessitate fortitude, composure, and a profound conviction in her own worth. She rehearsed her speech in front of the mirror, maintaining a steady yet firm tone. She was aware that this was not solely about her. It was about all individuals who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, or regarded as inferior. Evelyn was prepared for the shareholders' meeting, which was scheduled to take place in less than a week. She was not merely entering the room as a housekeeping woman, she was entering as an individual who was responsible for the company's future. However, Evelyn was unable to ignore the gravity of her impending actions as the day drew near. It was not merely a confrontation, it was a moment of truth. With a sense of assurance that permeated the building, the shareholders' meeting day arrived. The corridors were filled with the optimistic chatter of executives as they sauntered, anticipating another year of record profits. Evelyn's visage was as unreadable and placid as ever as she pushed her cleaning cart toward the top-floor conference room, and none of them noticed. The boardroom was in striking contrast to the remainder of the office. The gentle lighting illuminated the long polished table, and the floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of the Dallas skyline. The most influential individuals in the organization were seated around the table, with Alan Greaves at the helm. His posture was authoritative, and his grin was brimming with arrogance. Evelyn discreetly entered the room, as she consistently did, and placed a pitcher of water on the side table. She was not observed by anyone, she was merely a component of the background. However, Evelyn refrained from departing this time. She uttered, "Pardon me," her voice piercing the air like a blade. Heads were turned in confusion, and a faint sense of irritation. Alan scarcely observed her. He dismissed the situation by stating, "We are currently in the midst of something." Evelyn responded with a firm yet steady tone, "I understand. That is the reason I am present." Alan's face was adorned with a condescending smile as he reclined in his chair. "I recommend that you depart, unless you are present to clean up after us." Evelyn maintained her composure. Rather, she advanced, removing a folder from her cart and depositing it on the table. The words "Shareholders Report" were inscribed on the front, in addition to the Hawthorne and Beck logo. A hush descended upon the chamber. Evelyn's speech caused Alan's grin to waver. "For years I have observed this organization prosper on the backs of individuals you refuse to acknowledge," she declared, her voice unyielding. "I have observed the prioritization of profits over humanity, the violation of ethical standards, and the mistreatment of employees. However, I have maintained my silence until now." Around the table, murmurs suddenly broke out. Squinting at the folder, one of the board members leaned forward. "What is this?" Evelyn opened the folder and declared, "This is evidence. Proof of the unethical practices, the mismanagement, and the complete disregard for the individuals who operate this organization." Alan's voice resonated throughout the room. "Who are you to make accusations and enter this space? You are a cleaning lady." Evelyn responded to his gaze with a composed demeanor that caused a tremor in the room. "I am the majority shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck, Mr. Greaves. I am terminating your employment today." Much like a thunderclap, the jolt reverberated throughout the chamber. Alan's face became pallid, and his confident demeanor crumbled as the words set in. "You're joking," he replied, his voice faintly quivering. Evelyn maintained her composure. "I am not Mr. Greaves." She directed her attention to the board members, her eyes fixed on them. "I have spent years collecting evidence, and it is all here: the inflated expense reports, the unethical layoffs, and the harassment complaints you have suppressed. I have the authority to remove him, and I am utilizing it." The room was engulfed in disorder. Alan attempted to dispute, his voice raising in desperation. However, the board members promptly recognized the severity of the situation. Evelyn was approached by each individual, who inquired, reviewed the folder, and verified her assertions. The vote transpired in relatively short order. Evelyn had conducted her research thoroughly, and the evidence she presented was unequivocal. Alan Greaves was terminated from his position that afternoon, and his protestations were ignored as security personnel led him out of the building. Evelyn maintained a composed demeanor as she stood in the boardroom,
her back erect. The executives who had previously disregarded her now gazed upon her with a combination of remorse and admiration. However, Evelyn was not seeking their endorsement. She had already determined her next course of action. Alan Greaves' dismissal was communicated throughout the organization with the rapidity of a conflagration. The office was ablaze with disbelief and speculative activity by the following morning. How could the cleaning woman, Evelyn, who is modest and demure, have been the majority shareholder throughout the entire time? The break rooms and hallways were filled with whispers, but this time they were not dismissive. They were brimming with reverence, respect, and a hint of remorse. Nevertheless, Evelyn refrained from basking in the attention. The following day, she returned to the office with a clipboard and a plan, rather than a mop and pail. She was not merely present to terminate a noxious CEO. She was also present to alter the company's future. Evelyn labored assiduously to implement changes in the weeks that followed. She initiated her efforts by focusing on those who had been disregarded for an extended period of time. The housekeeping staff and other underappreciated employees were granted raises. Evelyn ensured that the HR department took harassment and discrimination complaints seriously by establishing a third-party overseer to guarantee transparency. Additionally, she addressed the pernicious culture that had developed under Alan's leadership. The board, which was previously complicit in his actions, was now held accountable. Evelyn was adamant about the necessity of consistent training programs that prioritized employee well-being, inclusion, and ethics. For the first time in years, employees at Hawthorne and Beck experienced a sense of being seen, heard, and appreciated. However, Evelyn did not conclude her remarks. She organized town hall meetings, inviting employees of all ranks to contribute their perspectives and experiences. She heard attentively, taking notes and guaranteeing that all individuals had the opportunity to contribute to the organization's future. A young intern, who had spilled coffee near Alan's office months prior, halted Evelyn as she was walking through the office one afternoon. "Thank you," he said, with genuine gratitude. "For everything, you have transformed this location." Evelyn's expression was amiable. "No, we have collectively transformed this location." The late afternoon sun illuminated the Dallas skyline, which was visible from the building. Evelyn paused, gazing upward at the soaring glass structure into which she had previously entered undetected. Although it had been a protracted journey, she had accomplished what many believed was unattainable. This was not solely about the removal of a CEO or the disclosure of corruption. It was intended to demonstrate that despite the fact that an individual may feel insignificant, they possess the capacity to effect significant change. Evelyn had demonstrated that resilience, perseverance, and integrity could prevail over avarice and arrogance. She exhaled deeply, experiencing a tranquility that had not been experienced in years. Subsequently, she exited the scene, not to disappear into the background, but to embark on a new chapter in her life. The quiet fortitude of those who observe, endure, and act when the time is perfect is frequently underestimated by life. Evelyn's narrative serves as a reminder that even the most unlikely individuals can serve as the impetus for significant transformation. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you found her voyage to be inspiring. This will provide you with additional tales that demonstrate the power of justice and resilience.